Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the museum. It's great to have all of you here tonight. Thanks so much for being here. I'm John Holler, the CEO, and I'm happy to welcome you tonight on behalf of our board and our staff, our members, and our many volunteers. It's great to have you here on a warm April evening. I want to thank the Intel Corporation, which has provided major support for the Revolutionary Speaker Series for 6 years now. So we're very happy to have Intel supporting us. That's right, give it up for Intel. That's a great series. The name Shuhei Yoshida has been synonymous with the Sony PlayStation since the first console burst onto the gaming scene just in time for the holiday shopping season in 1994. That's right, the PlayStation is 20 years old this year, which is hard to believe. Since that time, Shu has, of course, been instrumental in leading the development of every PlayStation platform for the last 2 decades, as he was this year with the debut of PlayStation 4. That clearly puts Shuhei Yoshida as president of the worldwide studios for Sony Computer Entertainment very high in the pantheon of gaming legends in the history of the field. Many of you also know Mark Cerny, who I mentioned earlier, a legend in his own right. He will lead tonight's conversation. Mark has an equally distinguished career in the development of game software. His roots extend back to Atari, where he started in the 1980s at the age of 17. He has won almost every award in the industry and has been inducted into the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. But what you may not know, and what will become clear tonight, is what makes their pairing on this stage so special. Mark and Shu have not only worked together for 18 years in mostly the history of the PlayStation, but this time, for the first time in Sony's history, Shuhei Yoshida placed the responsibility for co-development of the PlayStation 4 in Mark's hands. Never before had a software guy, much less an American, played such an important role in the development of the PlayStation system. The results have been stunning and successful. And tonight, they're here to talk about their long partnership, the evolution of the gaming industry, and the arc of a future where tablets and phones and virtual reality glasses are every bit as important as that box in your living room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shuhei Yoshida and Mark Cerny.
So, Shuhei Yoshida has had an amazing career, which mostly I'll let him explain. But the short version is that Shu has spent the last 22 years in video games as a producer, as a studio executive, and he's been involved in the creation of, or supported the creation of, an amazing number of titles. Anything from Crash Bandicoot on the original PlayStation through Journey on PlayStation 3. At any rate, we're going to talk about a great variety of topics today, and I want to make sure that we manage to stay close to the topics that are of interest to you. So, Shu, can you first explain a little bit about Sony?
Sorry,
yes.
Before we start, maybe we should talk about John's introduction.
Yes.
There are a couple of things that he said is not correct. and unless I correct it, some people might get offended. Like something like, I was not synonymous to PlayStation.
That's so interesting. The first 5 years, nobody knew who you were. In the first 15 years, nobody knew who I was. Yes. Yep. So we should talk about that tonight.
Okay. Later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we should hit that. Okay. So, Sony Computer Entertainment. What sort of products does the company make? How large is it? Where is it located?
We make PlayStation, and SCEA is a subsidiary of Sony. Incorporated in 1993, year before the launch of PlayStation 1 in Japan. And the company have about 5,000 employees across Japan, US, Europe, Asia. And about half of that work for Worldwide Studio making games. So.
Which is your role, because you run the Worldwide
I oversee
Studio.
the Worldwide Studio first-party game development. And I myself's home office is in Tokyo, but the studios are in US and Europe and Japan. And actually the largest space is here in the US. And Europe is pretty large as well. And the reason my base is in Japan is I spend lots of time working with the hardware people who are mostly based in the Tokyo office, representing the game teams And Mark visit our office in Tokyo every month, working as one of the hardware guys.
So what's a typical day like?
Myself? So I try to spend 3 weeks a month in Japan and 1 week either in the US or Europe. And when I'm in Japan, when I wake up, I always have my tablet at the bed and open up my Twitter account and see lots of people having some issues with PlayStation. Asking questions when is this feature coming? Your competition announced this, you are slow and you are lazy. Or
I know, it was a lot better last year, right?
Last year was awesome, amazing. But with all these comments and requests and some reports of some bugs that we were not aware, that actually helps us. So I correct in the morning before I wake up, from the bed, and find some alarming things, and immediately send out email to the appropriate group in the office, and they love it. So that's how I start my day.
Which is not the main job, right? Because that's theoretically a completely separate group that looks after the user experience.
That's not supposed to be job, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's my personal Twitter account, but because lots of people tweet to me, so I'm doing like this almost official customer service job, and the company started to use me when company send out propagate some something to say. They ask me, can you tweet this? And other people, like developers, tweet to me with the link of their newly announced game, like especially indies, and I'll be happy to do so if I think the game is great. So it's becoming more and more like a part of my job.
But the main job, if you say you're a producer of video games, maybe that's something that people can understand what it might be. But to say that you're head of the worldwide studio, what does that really mean on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so luckily, day-to-day, so I'm in Japan not because I'm there to manage studios in Japan. I have pretty reliable, strong, talented, personable leaders in US, and Scott Rhodes is sitting there smiling, and leader in Europe and Japan. These studio managers do the day-to-day management, and what I get involved is to discuss some large decisions like investing in some new development or change course of some development, or even stop development or something, or the annual budgeting or strategic portfolio discussions with wonderful marketing team that we have. For example, under SCEA, the Sean Layden is here, the new president and CEO of SCEA. So I get involved in those types of discussions. So I do not really spend time on a particular title, other than I get to visit studios and teams every 2 or 3 months, because it's a nice chunk of time for the team to make progress, and I play games in development and say something that they may or may not take seriously.
If you go back, 10, 15 years ago, product development, pretty much make the product, interface with marketing, interface with PR, fairly isolated within the corporate structure, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
And so, really, what I see as far as the Worldwide Studios goes and your role within it is so much has changed about the way in which the Worldwide Studios interfaces with the rest of the company. I remember the YCon, which I think is a story we've never told as to why the move was originally called the YCon.
Yeah.
I hope you remember.
Yes, absolutely. So it's more about the how worldwide studio game developers get involved in making the hardware rather than managing the game studios. Ycon example. So Ycon was the code name, project name for PlayStation Move, the motion controller that we released on PS3. And the SCEA R&D team, very smart software researchers, engineers, named this project Ycon because this project was one of the very first hardware project formed with three groups, the software engineering team in SCEA and the hardware engineers in SCEI in Japan and worldwide studios teams, making games using the motion controller. So, because three groups, were making one project, so Rick Marks, the researcher, the inventor of Ycon, Move, PlayStation Move, named it Ycon as a project. And that was very early examples of how worldwide studio and hardware guys started to work very closely. And right after, we embarked on much larger project that you were involved in both PS4 and PS Vita development in 2008.
Yeah, because up until that point, we'd mostly been making games, and the hardware would arrive, and we'd get manuals for it, and that is the first time we'd ever hear about it.
Yeah,
really.
For PS2 and PS3, we remember we were there in Tokyo when hardware guys are holding the internal secret seminar, amongst other third-party publishers,
Yes.
engineers.
It's great news, guys, we're done. But you don't want to hear that they're done, right? You want to hear that they're just getting going and that they have questions about what they ought to be doing.
The one great example of that old days of making platform PlayStation was for PlayStation 3, the DualShock 3 controller had a motion sensor. We called it 6-axis, even though it had the
4 axes.
Four
Yes.
sensors.
It's marketing.
Yeah. I added two, made it 6-axis. And so I was managing the US development group at the time. And I got a call from a product manager in Japan, like 3 weeks before the E3. And she told me that the new controller we are developing, it has motion sensor in it. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So what it does? And she said, well, we have prototype we'll send you, so can you make something to show at E3?
So
Okay.
we had managed to develop our new controller without ever involving a person who made games or a consumer.
Absolutely. Well,
Yes.
because up to PS3, we had
Ivory Tower.
a genius engineer, visionary, making the hardware, right?
As he was, definitely, yes.
Yeah. So when I got the phone call and I received a couple of prototypes, so we found this game called Warhawk that was in development, was kind of perfect match, because it was a flying game, flying airplane, and the controller had the motion sensor. So instead of using analog stick, how about using motion sensor to navigate? So the team spent a week or so incorporating it just in time for E3 and demonstrated it as a new feature of the controller.
In such a way as to imply that the game had been specifically created to use that controller.
Absolutely. The team worked very closely and long time to incorporate. So that was PS3 and PS4 was totally different.
And I think that's when you said things have to change.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have quite the reputation as a gamer, but not just the PlayStation games. You play games from the competition, whether that be other consoles or smartphones or tablets or the like. And you tweet about them. How does that work? Isn't that a bit counterproductive?
Oh, no, it's very productive. right? So the ideas can come from everywhere, right? I'm not making games, but I'm in the position to, evaluate games or, have discussion with game creators who comes up with some, new ideas. And, but some ideas might already exist in the market, right? And that could be applied to or changed or improved. So it's always good to play games of other people making so that we get inspired.
It's good to play games.
Yeah.
But when you're complimenting that Nintendo title that has no hope of ever showing up on a PlayStation platform.
That
then,
side.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
You go on
actually,
Twitter and you
yeah.
say how much you enjoyed it.
I have 2 Wii U's. I already talk about. Actually, I own 2 units of every single console that almost
Backup?
ever come.
One is backup.
No. One is to play US games,
Oh.
and one is to play Japanese games.
Which is no longer necessary on PlayStation platforms.
Yeah. I mean 2 units of other companies' console. So when I got, and actually I try to buy, I actually buy the competition's hardware on the day it comes out. And when I cannot find on the store, I purchase from the auction site, right? So I typically spend $100 more than what they are charging. So I'm a very good customer. So when I got hold of Wii U, the US version, and they had this very interesting social kind of integrations called Miiverse that you can doodle on the Wii U tablet and post comment for other people to see. So, but I was banned on the system twice. The first time, because I had put my Twitter account, at YOSP on my profile, and that was against their rule of having the identifiable, ID. So that's fair enough. So I deleted it. They are very nice to let me know that was not allowed. And the second time was when I wrote, I love PS, and that they banned me again, and said that you are not supposed to promote commercial product in Miiverse. Yeah, so they correctly interpreted PS as PlayStation. Anyway, so.
So is there any creator that you follow in particular?
Game creators?
Yes.
Yeah, lots of indie guys, very, these days, they are star indie people who are very, talkative, and they say very interesting things. Yeah, Rami is the one, Mike Bissell is the other. What's great about indies is they are managing themselves. They are not part of large corporation, or they don't need to ask PR people for approval to say something, right? They can control their own destiny. So they speak.
Do you ask PR people for approval to say something?
Well, US and Japan for some company like ours. Yeah, so it's really, really fun. And actually, these people tend to be still in their 20s or early 30s. And talking with them makes me feel really excited.
Oh, excited? I thought you were going to say makes you feel old.
Oh, yeah. Same time.
I was going to agree. How did this happen?
They are fearless, right?
Yeah, that was us 20 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, let's talk about ourselves.
Let's talk history. Let's talk history for a bit. Where did you grow up? What did your family do?
Well, my father used to own some small wholesale company for a small town near Kyoto. That he traded fish and vegetables for local pop and mom store. And of course, the supermarket came in, and he went out of business. But anyway.
And so he decided that his son was going to be a chemical engineer. Am I remembering properly?
Oh, well, almost. Yeah.
Almost.
So in high school, I was really into the how you call it, the physics of Albert Einstein. The light speed and some infinite weight or something. So I really wanted to go into that kind of research. But my father, business person, told me,
You need
who
something.
do you think is paying your?
You need something
Maybe.
stable, serious job.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So okay.
like games.
No. So I switched to major economics, like a business, right? To follow my father's suggestion. That really helped me feel very independent. I really wanted to run away from home as soon as possible because of that. And so in Japan, the people who college students who study in the science study a lot. They, like people here, I guess. But people in the art or business, they really don't come to the class. So I was one of them, playing like a mahjong all day, and
At some elite Japanese university.
Yeah. Like lots of us. So the class had like 40 or 50, people in the class in this university, but always only 4 or 5 people attended the class. And what they do is take notes, right? And in particular, the university I went to, the Kyoto University, was very, very generous. So there's only one exam at the end of the year. And before the exam, professor announced the test. This is a test. And 4 or 5 people who attend the class create the answers and distribute to all the others. So everybody copied the answer because, that's the right answer. And the professor gives you the, minimum, like whatever is equivalent of 2.0 here, right? So you get the credit with a minimum score, and you get to graduate. So I spent 6 months working in Australia in the first year of the college, major, what do you call it, the third year?
Junior year.
Junior. But I was able to accumulate all the credit at the end of the year when I came back to Japan and got all the answers from my friends. And the fourth year, the senior year, I didn't attend any class at all. So that is Japan.
You majored in beer. So then you
I'm
went
on
to
the script, right?
you.
I'm on the pretty much on the script.
That wasn't on any of these cards, I'll tell you. What is on the card is you went and then got continued your education in the States, in LA.
Yeah. So I joined Sony right, out of the college, university. So I wanted a couple of reasons, I wanted to live and work outside Japan. And Sony at the time was doing business, globally. So it looked like a good company to join. And when I say this may sound, incredible, unbelievable, but I was thinking maybe Sony will make games in the future. Really, I was thinking. And when that happens, I'm going to join that, group. Being a, college student, have no idea how business works, right? So I was thinking something like that. So I joined Sony, and Sony was doing very well at that time, making money, and was sending lots of employees, young employees, to U.S. colleges.
So you joined and then they sent you to LA to get
after a few years of work.
to get your master's.
Yes. So I went to UCLA. I got accepted by the business school there, AGSM. So I spent 2 years as a sponsor student. That means Sony continued to pay me some minimum salary and paid me to move over to LA and spend 2 years. And all the classmates in the same school spent 3 months between the first and second year of MBA working for some company for experience and relationship. But because I knew I was going back to Sony, so I decided, oh, okay, let's travel. So I spent 2 months with my wife in Europe, traveling all over Europe. Very cheap, like U-Rail pass travel, and 1 month, driving around the western part of United States for the 3 months when the classmates are working. That's on the script, right?
So, degree in international business, something.
Yeah, so for the first time at UCLA, I learned like microeconomics, macroeconomics, statistics, all these like a basic college work for the first time. And actually the biggest gain for me was meeting with lots of smart, American people. And knowing that, they are really very well trained to present and persuade and make argument, but they are not so scary. So that was the biggest thing I learned by spending 2 years at UCLA. So I went back to Sony and joined the PC group of that time. I don't know if you know this, but the very first Apple computer, notebook computer, PowerBook 100, the smallest, was designed and manufactured by Sony. So there's a small group of Sony engineers making that computer for Apple computer. So I joined that group and worked for like 9 months or so. And for a new project that got canceled. And when I lost my work in the PC group, one of my former boss, so when I started Sony, I worked for a corporate, function called Corporate Strategy Group. And that boss let me know that, sure, if you are interested, meet this person.
It's Ken.
Was Ken Kutaragi.
Wow. So
I didn't know about Ken that time, but because I lost my project, so I met with Ken. And so I was recommended to meet with Ken because that former boss knew I was a gamer, big gamer. So I met with Ken, and Ken said to me something like, sure you know that this Silicon Graphics workstation that sold for $100,000. I'm making the machine something like that, and I'm going to sell it for $500. And I was like, wow, this person, Ken Kutaragi, is a liar. So that was my first impression and meeting with Ken.
And you were hired, if I remember this right, you were hired on the spot. Ken had his meetings, he's very intense, and if he didn't scare you off during the course of the hour, you were in.
Yeah, well, I don't know what Ken felt about me, so I went back to this person called Tokunaka-san, eventually became the president of Sony Computer Entertainment, and said that, well, Tokunaka-san, Ken, he's liar, right? And he said, no, I trust what he's saying. And I was like, that's amazing. Can I join? So that was how I got, I joined Ken's team. And at that time, Ken had 20 plus members, all engineers making the first PlayStation, like development. And in preparation for making it the business, they started to add non-technical person. And I was the very first one. And the first job I did was created something like business plans for PlayStation to present to Sony to get the funding. And amazingly, for me, at least, was 2 weeks after joining Ken, Terry Tokunaka, who recommended me to meet with Ken, came as our division boss. So I was like, oh, okay, the company works like this. So one by one, people, Ken and Tokunaka-san and the other half, the Sony Music people, started to prove people that they knew from both Sony and Sony Music
A lot of
Entertainment.
music people in the early days.
Yeah.
That was an interesting bunch, definitely.
Yeah, so SCE, when it started in Japan, was a joint venture of Sony, the electronics company, and Sony Music Japan, the music company. And when the company was incorporated in November of 1993, half the members came from Sony and the other half came from Sony Music. And Sony people, were responsible for making hardware, and the Sony Music people were responsible for, making games or, marketing or sales.
And it meant they had a pretty high tolerance for creatives.
Yes, that was a key.
No matter how, I don't know, enthusiastic we were, it probably didn't compare to what they'd seen on the Sony Music side.
Yeah, so
coming
for
over.
Sony Music people, they are, their business is like signing up with artists and help the artists create great music and, market and sell the product. So the artist management was their daily job. So initially in Japan, the PlayStation team approached the same way to treat the game developers as if they are like
Electronic artists.
yeah. And actually the development community loved that. And they were, because we were new, we tried to attract the creatives from different fields, like musicians. Matsuura-san was one of the popular musicians in Japan, created Parappa the Rapper, one of the successful PS1 titles. So at the beginning of PlayStation, because we knew we were new to the industry, we knew we had to learn from the industry people. So we visited lots of developers and publishers and got lots of feedback. And we really wanted to create something new. So we believed that the game could become entertainment for everyone. So by that time, consoles were a bit considered like a kid's toy. And that was the reason we struggled to get the PlayStation project greenlit by Sony. Some part of Sony management thought Sony shouldn't go into toy business. So the reason the company was named Sony Computer Entertainment instead of Sony Game Company or something like that, we believe that the game can be more than bigger than it was, before. So that was the way we started, and that culture of finding and helping the creative people to express, themselves and help them, their creation, stays now. So so if as a publisher we have some characters, among the industry, I think it's coming from this origin and the corporate culture that we have.
So in those days, if I remember properly, Shuhei Yoshida 1.0 was a business guy. So
Yes,
you
yes.
were doing the contractual side of it, you were the
Yeah.
legal side,
Yeah,
business development.
I was doing Adam Voice of that time. Yeah, third-party relations, manager, one of the managers. So I was helping Japanese publishers like Namco or Konami or Square Enix to create games for PlayStation for the first few years, 4 years. And after 4 years, we got all the major publishers in Japan to make games on PlayStation. Big thing for the market was getting Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest onto PlayStation. And that was a big goal that our third-party department team had, and we accomplished it. And because we worked hard to get that done, after 3 years, I kind of lost, the goal. So what's next? We got all the support from the industry. Where should we go? So, but luckily, that time I was offered to move over to product development in 1996.
Become a producer at that point.
Producer. And the reason was...
Well, we skip back to the first part because we met when you were in business development, right?
Oh, that's right.
Right?
That's right. So
this crazy American shows up on your doorstep.
1993, I think.
Yeah, late in the year.
Yeah.
And I wanted a dev kit.
Yeah. So because we are planning to... So PlayStation launched in Japan in 1994, December. And US launch was the September 1995. So it was long after Japan launch. So initially, in 1993, we were only planning to provide the development kit, like early prototype, to Japanese publishers and developers. So I was one of the account managers. And, but one day, I got a visitor from United States called Mark Cerny, representing Crystal Dynamics, the US publisher. And he spoke fluent Japanese and discussed the PlayStation. And he seems really proficient in 3D graphics. You were working on 3DO.
3DO.
Yeah, that time. And Mark clearly understands the difference between like tilting the triangle to make it look like 3D and drawing, rendering real 3D, right? So wow, this guy is smart and very impressive. And he said that, you said, how can I get the dev kit, right?
And what I heard was the reason I couldn't get a dev kit was that there were only, the contracts that had to be signed were only available in Japanese.
Yeah,
that's what I heard. So I'm thinking this is a simple problem. I'll just sign the Japanese contract.
Yeah, we had only Japanese contract at that time. So I said to Mark that, well, we have only contract written in Japanese. And he said, that's okay. So he took it back and came back next day with his signature. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll ship 1 unit or 2 units. And later, a couple of years later, I learned that Mark didn't get his headquarters approval to sign the contract.
I did not have signing authority legally. It was even worse. But that's good. We got the dev kit, which is the important thing.
Yeah. So you had an eye that even before PlayStation was launched, that this could be something you should get involved.
Oh, I was so happy. I've been working on 3DO. That's the first conversation I had with Ken was, is this real 3D or is it more twisted triangles like 3DO, which was really struggling to be that 3D system and not quite achieving it. All right, so sorry, I took us back in time.
That's the first time we met,
That's
right?
the first
93.
time.
And the second time we met, the reason I was offered the producer job from third-party relations was, so SCEA of that time picked up Crash Bandicoot from Universal Interactive that Mark was, managing. And because the deal was global, so we realized that we need a producer in Japan. But Japan studio at the time, no producer had the English capability. So Sato-san, the responsible for the product development, that time found me doing the TPR thing and offered me to become the producer. And that was my first project, was Crash Bandicoot. So that was 1996.
All I'd heard is that we were going to be having a meeting with Ken Kutaragi's hand-picked producer for the title from Japan. Those were scary words to hear. But it turned out to be Shu, so it was all okay.
So as a producer, I started the career as a producer, and I was given the opportunity to grow the internal studio in Japan, along with working with Mark's team on Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. And I don't know any other person in the industry who are luckier than me, because my first project was Crash Bandicoot, And my first internal project was Gran Turismo. See? So when I was responsible to grow the internal studio in Japan, there's only basically one team who are making this game called Motor 2 Grand Prix, the Kazunori Yamauchi's team. And they are finishing up the second project. That looked like Mario Kart, by the way, QT kart racing, but with really real car physics engine. So, and they're preparing for Gran Turismo. So working with Mark and Naughty Dog people, the great creators, what they do is make sure that everyone involved in their project do the top-notch job. Otherwise, they will do everything to replace those people involved. So I was a producer for the Crash Bandicoot project. So, very high standard, was set from Mark and the Naughty Dog people and the counterparts in the US. So that really, really helped me to grow as a producer.
That means your top two brands, or your first two titles were the top two brands on PlayStation.
Yep.
That's...
Life is easy, right?
So, going back to the hardware, so PlayStation succeeded, right? You've done this whole run-up to launch and it succeeded. How did that feel? Did PlayStation change the business? Was it another console? Was it
so from personal level, I was really, really, really hoping PlayStation was going to be successful so that I can continue to work on video game. So that is how low my goal was set. So when we launched in Japan with PlayStation 1, it sold out, and lots of people lined up to buy PlayStation. Sold out the day we launched. That's amazing. But we had only 100,000 units of that time. But so that was so amazing. And from the looking back the history of video game kind of way, so the reason that PlayStation became such a success were mainly, come from two big things that we introduced with PlayStation. One was on the technical side. PlayStation was very first real-time 3D graphics system that you can create the games with 3D graphics for the first time. So that opened up a lot of new kind of expressions and new type of games, or very great games like Crash Bandicoot or Final Fantasy VII. And the other part was the use of the disk media. So we adopted CD-ROM drive, and that drastically reduced the cost of goods for the software. And that really helped the publishers from large to mid-size to be able to work on something new with smaller lots.
Oh, I remember it a bit differently. I mean, I remember getting handed optical media, and the first thing you're wondering is, I've got 600 megabytes to fill. What the heck am I going to do with this? And the 3D graphics were such a transition, too. I mean, I go to shows, and we didn't have any idea how to create these virtual worlds. You'd have a game, you'd just be walking down a corridor, and you'd be walking so slowly because we'd be displaying every single polygon in the corridor. And as you walk down, it would get faster and faster and faster because we'd be displaying less and less until you got to the end of the corridor. And that, without any gameplay in it, was actually one of the demos at the shows from a major publisher. That's how primitive our understanding of 3D graphics was in those days. So, I mean, from my perspective, there was just this upheaval where we all had to suddenly figure out this whole new style of games. I mean, which we did. It was very good for the industry, I think. But I don't believe more than half of the people being employed in game development on the day when PlayStation came out were still there 5 years later.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there are lots of learnings.
Lots of learnings, yes. Yep. Boy, that was a conversation killer. So, so
Yeah, but the
console.
PlayStation was successful in the end, right? And lots of great games are made using 3D graphics.
It was really
now.
nice. I mean, personally, as a creator, it was wonderful for me because I'd always been dreaming of making those games. I mean, had been in the business for 12 years at that point, 12, 14 years, and I'd always had in mind that someday you'd be able to create something like Crash Bandicoot or Mario 64 or the like, and finally we could. So we did a couple things back then, it's true. It wasn't just you and me, it was Andy House as well back then, which is surreal. Because if you look at Crash and Spyro, I was a producer in the States, you were a producer in Japan. Andrew House, who of course now runs Sony Computer Entertainment, was the vice president of marketing.
Yeah, for the US.
For the US,
for the
yes,
US.
for the US.
And Sean Layden was in Japan, promoting games made outside Japan to the Japanese market. So I remember Sean holding this PR event for the games coming out from the US and Europe, like Twisted Metal or Formula One, and with microphone and with some jacket and making intentionally American accent in Japanese and doing the MC of the event. Yeah, so we grew up together.
Well, yeah, we must have been 33 or 34. I mean, I used to call us the Three Musketeers. Well, not to your faces, but I mean, you and I and Andy were all almost exactly the same age.
Yeah, yes.
Well, still are. It works that way. and Kaz Hirai, of course, who now runs all of Sony, was running Sony Computer Entertainment America.
Yeah, so after a few years, I was producing games in Japan. I got an offer to move over to the States in 2000. And it was Kaz Hirai, gave me an offer. So I moved over here and became responsible for, game development in the US. And we continued our work with Naughty Dog and Insomniac on PS2. And you are already independent.
Yes.
You left Universal.
Yes.
And so the
But you know why I left Universal? You took my teams. So of course, I had Naughty Dog and Insomniac under contract to make titles, which I then licensed to Sony, and as soon as their contracts were up, they signed with Sony directly and cut out the middleman, which was me. And it isn't that I minded that much. It's just that meant, now what am I going to do? Because I can go out there and I can try to find teams of that caliber. And she was saying he was lucky. I was so lucky to be able to work with Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin and Ted Price and the Hastings brothers. So what am I going to do? Am I going to find more teams? Or no, I decided I just give up. I was president of the studio, right? I gave up being president of the studio to go be a lone wolf consultant so I could keep working with the teams on the projects. Thank you, Shu.
Remember many conversations that we had in a hotel bar in
1998
in
or
Monica.
so. Yes.
Yeah. So you had Mark, you had to decide to continue to manage the studio and hire a new team, or you flip the relations from you hiring Naughty Dog and Insomniac
to them hiring me.
To them hiring you as a consultant.
Yes.
And we
made it all work.
I hope you made the right decision.
I think it worked out okay.
Yeah.
Easier if you hadn't stolen the teams, but still. So one thing we were doing then was really heavy usability.
Yep.
So that was very new. So first Crash Bandicoot game, almost unplayable in terms of difficulty when we hit alpha. And we managed to figure out, because of your testing group, you had for years some kind of consumer testing group in Japan?
Yeah. So in Japan, like I said, because we knew we are new to the industry, so we visited all the publishers, developers, and one of the things the Japanese publishers, educated us was one other major company called Nintendo. Really helped other third-party companies, like offering the usability test, feedback to try to elevate the quality of third parties titles. And it was recommended by one of the major Japanese publishers, and we are like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's create this group of consumers that we can draw into the office and test games in development. And as soon as I moved to game production, I was the heaviest user of the group. So every title, starting Crash or Gran Turismo, we went through many usability tests.
So you were not familiar with games, so you felt you needed to do the testing.
Right.
We were familiar with games, so we thought we didn't need to do any testing, ironically. And by that point, I mean, if you're a 5-10-year veteran of the business, that's all it took to be a veteran in those days. You were just sitting in the back room making games with your buddies, and if you all can play the game, you call it done and you ship it. Now, what you don't know is that a lot of kids may be unwrapping that Christmas morning, but they are in tears by Christmas evening. And this was just so fresh, this idea that you would actually, you're not done with the game. It violates confidentiality. It has to be a secret for some reason until you ship it, but you'll have real consumers play it. That was hugely valuable. I got to take all that back to the States and then talk to the guys at Naughty Dog about, we need to make this easier. Of course, what they'd say is, what do you mean it needs to be easier? I can finish that level. I mean, this is the guy who made it. And if you really went and checked, they couldn't even play their own game.
So I remember, so I was a producer in Japan, and the main interface was actually Mark. Mark spoke Japanese, and so I was so happy that Mark took our input seriously, and Mark actually started to use us like aggressively almost. And I remember my associate producer called Tsurumi. He took note of every single death of the test players. So we video recorded every single test, and he counted number of deaths and put on the 2D map that Mark created and sent to Mark. And Mark looked at it. We should add some checkpoint here or like that.
Well, that was his punishment, actually, because we'd started to think about difficulty, right? And
Yep.
so, are our games something that the consumers can play? And so he'd found a spot in the game where in Crash Bandicoot, instead of running into the screen, you have to turn around and run back. And he was saying, oh, this is a huge usability issue. We need to have a giant sign that says, turn around and go the other way. Whereas I'd seen players, they tried to go forward, they couldn't. So where is the only way you can go? It's backwards. And so rather than do the feedback to the game based on no input at all, the idea was, no, you have to find real consumers, study their real behaviors, and report back in. We don't want to do this just by thinking about what the experience might be like.
Yep.
And that's probably enough on usability.
Okay.
So,
Just one more
perhaps
topic.
not.
So that was the initial, stages, but it became more and more sophisticated. Mark started at the code so that without us watching videos, game like in development record every single death to the memory card that can be copied and sent to the developer. And nowadays, usability test, the game, testers, every single action can be monitored by the developer.
yeah, and it's very standard to do in the industry. In 1997, it was not something that people typically did. But I think collectively as an industry, we've grown to appreciate a lot more that it's not just the creator's vision, it's how the consumers are going to interact with that.
That sounds like a segue to...
Into the PlayStation 2 years. How about that? In 1999 or so, PlayStation 2 came out.
Yep.
And
How are we doing time-wise?
we're doing great.
Okay.
They don't stop us here.
Okay.
Um,
But we have PS2, 3, and 4. And we have
Okay.
15 minutes.
No. That was the minimum amount of time to talk,
okay.
not the maximum.
Yeah. We have another 2 hours.
So, in 1999 or so, PlayStation 2 came out.
Okay.
Can you talk a bit about console life cycles and why hardware is shipped, new hardware shipped, and with what timing and all of that?
Yeah, so the consoles, the great thing about consoles is it doesn't change, right? Computers change every year, better CPU, GPU, but the consoles never changes.
So it's very easy to make a game for it.
Yes, developers can, spend time learning about the console, develop engines that works, and every single game that develop, they know exactly how, consumers will play because the consumers use the same, equipment to play games. However, after a few years, the computing, always makes advancement, and the consoles, technology become older and older. So for the same price or same cost, a lot more can be done after a few years. So that cycle was 5 or 6 years, and that became a transition for PS1 to PS2 to PS3. So development of a new system takes 3 or 4 years. So the cycle was every time the new hardware shipped, the hardware team, small semiconductor team, immediately start researching into the next console.
Probably a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So you were in the States by that point. And you spent, between PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and I guess the early years of PlayStation 3, you spent 10 years in the States.
Yeah, 8 years. Yes.
8 years in the States. And how did the industry change? How did the work style change?
Changed a lot. So I moved to States in year 2000, at the launch of PS2. So at the time, I was pretty excited being a Japanese, being proud of part of the industry. Game industry is very rare industry that entertainment software made in Japan were enjoyed, globally. Of course, there are like animes and, manga, but in a much, smaller audience outside Japan. So I was very proud, so, I can import the Japanese way of making games. But, soon after, the PS2 era, what I found was the industry here and Europe, pretty much the same way, is very, very open and eager to learn with each other. Things like game development conference happens, and the people present how great things that you did and he did, and that kind of knowledge sharing was amazing. And people move from one company to the other that can spread the best practices and the techniques. So quickly during the PS2 era, the quality of games made in the States and Europe really, improved and leading, especially in the technology areas, and also at the same time learning a lot of how to make games feel great or help consumers to enjoy, taking some good practices from games made in Japan. So quickly after I came here, I kind of stopped looking at games made in Japan, and that was surprising for me, how I quickly changed, and I started to believe in, I'm very excited to be a part of industry here.
So for all this period we're talking about, you've been working with Ken Kutaragi, father of PlayStation.
Yep.
What was that like?
Yeah. So I worked under him for about 15 years, and for a half year directly, he was my boss at the beginning. But after that, indirectly under his group. And I have to say that without Ken, PlayStation didn't happen, and I wouldn't have had this amazing, fun career. So I have nothing but, respect and appreciation for what he has done to me, individually. That said, working for Ken was really, really difficult. And being, he was, very genius. But he could change what he was saying or leading the team 180 degrees in like this. So especially engineering team working directly under Ken had really difficult job trying to understand and predict where he might be going. And another thing that was difficult was somehow he struggled to give compliments to people that he worked with or he works for him. And over the 15 years, I got complimented by Ken twice. And when I say this to my colleagues, they say, twice, that's a lot. And that's how, for me, like giving compliment is free, right? It's like a smile free, for McDonald's. But somehow Ken, I don't know if he had been able to just say to his people, you did a great job, our life would have been much happier. But still, we all loved Ken.
Father of PlayStation.
Yep.
So,
sorry. Actually, he was a bit, he has this shy part of himself. And I remember one time when we were having, dinner with Ken, Ken said to me, still in a small group we were, I know that you, do not necessarily like me, but you are here working for me because you know that under me you can do some exciting work. And I was like, yes, exactly.
So we had Shuhei Yoshida 1.0 as a business development executive in Tokyo, and then Shu 2.0 as a producer.
Yep.
And then you did progressively more development in the States, and then in 2008 you were asked to move back to Japan, I guess, as Shuhei Yoshida version 3.0 to take over all product development for Sony Computer Entertainment.
Yep, yeah.
Regardless of platform, regardless of location. How did you feel about being chosen for that?
Actually, that's so. For the entire career up until 2008, that time, I was so lucky that after a couple of years of doing my job, when I started to feel comfortable doing something, somehow someone said that, Shu, are you interested to do this new thing? Like a dangling, carrot. And I'm like, oh, that sounds, exciting. So let me do that. So I moved from the TPR, third-party relations work, to product development in Japan, to managing studios in the US, without me asking for, these opportunities. Always someone said, Shu, are you interested to do this? So I was fortunate, and somehow I thought life is like that, right? Life is easy, right? But when 2008, after 3 years of incorporation of Worldwide Studios, Phil Harrison, president of Worldwide Studios at that time, suddenly quit and went to Atari. And I was really close to Phil, making Worldwide Studio at that time. After Phil's sudden departure, there are all kinds of speculations and discussions started in the company at the highest level. So I started to hear some ideas of what kind of organization setup is best for the company. In a sense, questioning why Worldwide Studio exists. So when I heard about that, I was really, really felt, threatened, because I truly believed in what we are doing was the right thing, sharing tech and sharing know-how and making, investment globally. So I talked to Sato-san, who was, my mentor in Japan, who gave me the producer job in the first place, what I should do. And his advice to me was create 3 or 4 page PowerPoint, PowerPoint specifically, and pitch to Kaz. Kaz was the president of SCEA at that time. That I will manage Worldwide Studio, and this is how I'm gonna do that. So I took the advice and put together. This is how I'm gonna do the Worldwide Studios to Kaz. And for the first time, I said that I want this job, and that was accepted. And at that time, Kaz took over from Ken and starting the new project. 2008 was when we started PS4 and PS Vita project. And so he instructed, okay, going forward, Worldwide Studio should be the part of the platform development. So Shu, I let you be the president of Worldwide Studio, but you have to move from US to Japan so that, I can work very closely with the hardware team. So that's how it happened.
And simultaneously, I took over the architecture role on the hardware.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes.
Which is somewhat surreal, right? Because if you go back enough years, I'm the software guy and you're the third-party relations.
But from my standpoint, it looked really like a natural progression of how you worked from game to game tech for us, for title, to game tech for the older Worldwide Studio.
I'm getting further and further away from the products.
Further into the core tech and going into the really hardware guy. And that was the best, one of the best decisions company made to put you in the position, the software person who understands hardware. You used to make hardware as well for the arcade, and who speaks Japanese and kind of understands Japanese culture.
Shu, as much as any American ever can.
Well, for the way of work in the US and in Japan is so different. So it's hard for American people to work with the group of Japanese.
Oh, that's not that hard.
Yeah, that is hard. Anyway, so that's how we grew up together and with more larger role for the company. And it's been great ride for both of us.
Definitely can't complain. It's true. So, PlayStation 4, we did something very different. So we decided that we wanted to bring the developers in as much as possible in the process of creating the hardware, and we wanted to think about the end user, the game player, as much as possible as well. And how do you think that succeeded? I mean, as you look back, our strategy,
well,
would you have changed the way we did that?
How could I? Yeah, so we were working with some belief that PS4 we want to make it very easy for developers to work on. We really wanted to change a lot of things from PS3 days because we are consumers as well, and it was really when we prepared for the announce event of February that we got together and really looked at ourselves and think this is what we've been doing in terms of 5 principles that we used. So we didn't,
Yeah,
create
we've
those.
been going on instinct for 5 years, and we didn't
Yeah.
codify it until we had to actually explain it to the world.
Yeah, and that made sense to us because that's what we are doing. And luckily, that resonated very well with consumers. We got lots of support. And at the same time, somehow I found myself in a position to be one of the forefront to consumers. And every day I get, great feedback from consumers. So every morning, it's a humbling experience.
Any problem, hardware, software, or UI, yes.
Yeah, and all the
Fix it,
features
please.
that they want on PS4, they believe that all the features that existed on PS3 should be there day one on PS4, even though the architecture is very different, and the system software guys have to make all features one by one. So we still have lots of work to do. But as long as we continue to talk with these consumers, I think, because there are lots of consumers, there are many people and great ideas we can find. So as long as we continue to talk with developers, including our own teams and third-party developers, I think they will guide us to the right place.
So coming out of last year, we shipped in November, Xbox One shipped in November, PlayStation 4 is outselling Xbox One globally by something like 1.5 to 2 times. Why do you think that is?
You sound like the business journalist, suddenly, Mark.
I'm trying to work it around. Okay, we'll go to the fun one. Okay, that game sharing controversy video.
Yeah, that was fun.
So, 14 million hits for your
Yes.
YouTube video. Shu was top 10 for YouTube last year. How did that come about?
Oh yeah, so the Adam boys, my co-actors in that video, came up with this idea. So going into E3 last year, it was, for me personally, it was less about Microsoft. It was about ourselves, because Microsoft was kind of making some noises about their own policies. Lots of consumers bugging us, asking us, Sony, what is your policy? So we believe we have to really explain it very well, going into E3. And so that was one of the things we needed as a company to communicate during the E3 conference. So it was included in the script for Jack. So when I flew in to the LA, for rehearsal, I was welcomed by Adam and the corporate PR people and Scott Lodi, and said, Shu, we have something we want you to do. And they explained to me, their plan. And okay, let's do it. And we spent like 15 minutes filming like 4 different versions of, sharing. And the video editor spent, a few hours after that. And that video was created. And next day, the day of the press conference, in the morning, so Adam and I were waiting for Andy and Jack to see the video and give green light to release it. Actually, we are pitching to show it during the press conference, but smartly they said that no, let's not do it in the conference.
I heard Jack said, yeah, it's really great, and no.
Yeah, so do it virally. Yeah. So Adam and I waited after our part was done in the back room watching Jack to start talking about the policy. So we had our smartphones with the tweet with the link of the video, and we are like 3, 2, 1, go.
And that was it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
took off from there. You simply posted it and got 14 million hits.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Okay, a few questions from the audience. How was Sony able to avoid the pitfalls that Sega fell into during the PlayStation Dreamcast era? And what role did the Dreamcast failure play in the PlayStation's success? Because as we were coming up, Sega was exiting the market.
Specifically about Dreamcast?
How is it that...
Well, this is how I remember. So the Dreamcast launched year before PlayStation 2, I think. But one of the major publishers decided not to support the console, EA.
And that was very large.
That was very large part. And because of the PS2's success, like immediate success after PlayStation 1's success, Sega decided apparently they cannot continue to support the platform. It's it takes a lot to maintain platform business. So the question was how we can avoid.
How we are avoiding.
How we are avoiding.
Or we can go to the next question.
Yeah.
So
that's all we do.
So we talked about usability, and we talked about coordinating with all the various groups inside of Sony as far as making games go, but we didn't talk about the creative aspects, which you are involved in. Mm-hmm. So how has your approach changed in terms of dealing with developers and getting them to balance art and commerce?
That's a great question. Actually, I do not use the term art. There's a great quote by Jason Rubin that we worked with on Crash Bandicoot. He said that we are just making really great games, and people call it an art when we make great games. Yeah. So talking about supporting the creative vision of the developer and how we are balancing that with the commercial reality. That's the question, right?
Yeah, I guess on some level you have to be balancing those because ultimately you are deciding whether or not to fund projects like Journey.
Yep.
Which clearly are not targeting the usual, demographic or... Well, they could be the usual demographic, but it's a very different approach to gameplay.
Well, actually, supporting Journey was very easy.
Because it was Genova.
Yes. Because we believed in the developers' vision, but the indie games, small games are small in budget, so making it or not making it in terms of commercial success or failure really doesn't affect us, right?
Heavy rain.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to larger game development, it's really, really a serious business, especially these days, because the cost of development has become larger, and the commercial reality of the market is everybody buying the biggest, best games in the market. So the market has polarized. Unless you are the best in the category or the most unique, like a small digital titles, you cannot really make ends meet. So that's how mid-sized publishers kind of disappeared for the last couple of years. So that's the commercial reality. And when we spend $50 million, for example, for one product, it's a big bet. We just cannot make it like indie titles. So we have much more involved process with the business side of the organizations, and make sure that when we make that huge bet, we have support from the business side of the company. Otherwise, no game would be successful. Even if we make great game without, marketing support or PR support, the game wouldn't be successful. So we've been working with the marketing side of the company to how best we manage this very difficult question.
Totally different question.
Okay.
Why do you think that Japanese have been such prolific developers of video gaming software? Is it cultural, educational, geographic? And you were saying that you stopped looking so much at Japanese game design after the 90s, but if you look at the 5 decades that games have been around, Japan has been huge. Why do you think that might be?
You mean still? Well, making games in Japan is really hard these days because the console market is much smaller in relative standpoint, and the market of this polarized market of big games getting bigger. It's really, really tough for the Japanese publishers to keep up with both technically and the investment on console games. So that's why Japanese publishers been hedging bets to especially mobile development and social games and portable games. Portable games is very popular in Japan, like 3DS and PS Vita, because the way they play games, they do not have large living room at home. They, enjoy, meeting up outside their, houses and play games with friends. So the portable gaming is really perfect from lifestyle, standpoint. So the portable games are like 1 or 2 generations behind in terms of tech and size of development. So it's kind of perfect for the Japanese publishers in terms of hedging risk as well. So, so if you're talking about quality of these titles being made in Japan, some of the games, some uniquely Japanese games are still being made, like a JRPG. And I think for the Japanese industry to continue to be successful, they should really focus on what they can do best. Many games were made in Japan trying to appeal the Western audience, really without understanding the culture of that, and most of them failed. So, but when they make really games for Japanese audience, when they make it really, really well, they can find audience outside Japan as well. So I think that's what they should continue to do.
Last question. What is the best way you feel to get involved in the game industry? You want to make video games, you want to be a designer or an artist or a programmer, or maybe you're a student. What would you recommend doing?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty much same comment come from industry people, is find what you can do in terms of making something. So if you are good at programming or art or writing or so start making stuff. There are lots of tools nowadays that you can create art or even game by individuals, and lots of games are made by 1 person or 2 people and published on mobile platforms or PC. And by doing so and getting the direct feedback from consumers, that you can learn the art of making games. So start making something is the answer. There are lots of tools.
Thank you, Shu. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.